This KTVU investigative report includes discussions of rape and sexual violence. Please use caution and discretion when watching.
A federal women's prison plagued by a sex abuse scandal.
He would tell me that if he could come into my cell, that he would bend me over and with me.
Correctional officers targeting incarcerated women.
It's not often that a warden gets caught with a government computer and phone full of pornographic images of incarcerated people.
KTVU Fox 2 searching for answers.
Are you concerned that you may actually be going to prison? Just like the one you were warden at?
Investigating the abuse of power, manipulation, and sexual coercion.
Clearly, the prison was not being properly run. It had poor management.
Whistleblowers tried to pull back the curtain on toxic culture and cover-ups.
I've wanted to speak publicly long before this.
Rape and retaliation.
I was petrified. I was traumatized.
And the stories of abuse still exist today, years after 8 prison guards have been charged, and from federal oversight to the prison shutting down.
Right when we felt safe, the rug was completely pulled out from underneath us.
This is a KTVU investigation. Powerless in prison, the fallout of FCI Dublin. After years of whispers in the corridors of FCI Dublin, followed by the stunning stories from inside, the doors of the notorious women's prison are closed and the women relocated, all because a judge mandated reforms after women were raped and retaliated against. KTVU has been entrenched in this saga for years, giving voice to those who survived and whose stories eventually brought down the prison, nicknamed the Rape Club. Over the next hour, we're going to take you through the newest developments and go back to the beginning of how this all came into the light. Welcome to Powerless in Prison, the fallout of FCI Dublin. I'm Christina Rendon. The closure of FCI Dublin came in a surprise announcement 1 month ago by Bureau of Prisons Director Colette Peters. She said despite unprecedented efforts and steps to have additional resources, the prison was not meeting expected standards ranging from recruitment and retention, aging infrastructure, and most critical, employee misconduct. We spoke exclusively with a woman who was released from the prison as it was preparing to close. We want to warn you, some viewers may find this content offensive and upsetting. How did you find out the prison was closing and what went through your mind?
We all woke up to it on the news. Just all the TVs scrolling across the bottom said Dublin prison closing today. I mean, the whole place was in a panic. People were crying. My absolute best friend in there is 80 years old. And to see what she went through, that just fear of being shackled, was a self-surrender. She's never been handcuffed before. So to see what she went through over this, I can't explain it.
Kendra Drysdale called it the most devastating news. Days earlier, she and others incarcerated at FCI Dublin had hope things would change with a special master appointed to oversee reforms.
Immediately, they started shredding documents. Like bags and bags of documents.
Kendra, incarcerated for distribution of methamphetamine, says her case files were destroyed. The program she completed at other prisons and anything she earned at Dublin, like certificates and a diploma, gone.
It looked like I had completed nothing. Anything positive that were in our files were no longer there. People's compassionate releases were shredded.
As women were transferred out in preparation for the closure, the 50-year-old says she was set to go to a halfway house in Oakland. Her attorneys pushed to have her credits looked at again by officials. Turns out Kendra had already completed her time. She was supposed to be released in February instead of April.
I can't say whether they purposely miscalculated my credits, but they're saying it was an error. So there's a law called the Second Chance Act that allows for up to 12 months of home detention prior to that. So it would have been last February that I could have been home.
At the beginning of the year, Kendra testified in federal court about the retaliation she faced for reporting an officer who she says inappropriately touched her breasts during a pat-down search in 2023.
I've been incarcerated for a long time now, and never ever has anyone done that to me before. Maybe she was just being overly thorough, I don't know, but I felt like it was not policy and it was not okay.
Within an hour of reporting the abuse, she says she was seen by a psychologist and an internal investigator. The next day, she says officers told her she was lying and accused her of trying to file a false report. Her phone, email, visits, and commissary were all taken away for 7 months. It was proof to her attorneys that women were retaliated against for reporting abuse. And the federal judge agreed. Kendra's record was cleared 2 weeks ago. She was released from FCI Dublin, reuniting here with her family. Though she was able to go home, she still thinks about the women who remain incarcerated.
The idea that you don't know where you're going, you know you're going to be farther away from your family, there's no chance of visits any longer. They didn't have to traumatize these women so much more than they've already been.
We'll hear more from Kendra throughout the show. A spokesperson for the BOP said they have no reason to believe the allegations of shredding documents are true, but if they are, it would constitute staff misconduct. They have forwarded those claims to the Office of Internal Review. Roughly 600 women who were at Dublin are now at various minimum and low security prisons across the country, including West Virginia, Texas, Alabama, Connecticut, West Virginia, and Florida. And we're also hearing the BOP is making room at prisons in other states like Oklahoma and Washington. This news took everyone by surprise, including Jessica Pride, an attorney representing survivors.
Women are being shipped across the country to places that are farther from their families and loved ones. They're being sent to facilities where management that used to be at Dublin is now there, and they potentially could suffer retaliation in the new facilities. And there's no guarantee that they're going to be safe at the next facility.
Women are telling us it is chaos inside FCI Dublin as the prison was closing. They say correctional officers were treating them horribly amid the move-outs. And we obtained this audio recording from inside where an incarcerated woman describes the treatment they received when another woman refused to leave.
Like, lockdown, we're not, bro. We're not going to lock down. We want to see what the you guys are doing. Like, you guys are mistreating us for no reason. You know what I mean? Like, you guys are treating us like we're animals. And so this lady comes in and she's like, lock the down. She's like, it's your guys' fault that we're getting shut down. She's like, it's all your guys' fault. I said, no. I said, the reason why this place is getting shut down, I said, is because your staff can't keep their in their pants.
We have also heard reports there was inadequate medical attention, lack of food and water for those awaiting transfer, and confiscation of personal property. And at the same time, KTVU was inundated with calls from loved ones who were left in the dark. Dozens of people contacted KTVU to share concerns. The closure of FCI Dublin came with little to no notice for the women inside and their families.
They were not allowed to take their that much belongings with them, like one pair of pants, so many shirts, etc. It's all chaotic. Nobody seems to know what is happening. So it's just a bad situation all around.
My mom called me early this morning about 7:30 stating that she's scared. She don't know what's going on, that they came and told her that the whole prison's going to shut down, that they'll be shipped out by Friday, and that she don't know where she's going. She's already 5 hours away from us now. Like, where are they going to take my mother to now? You know, like, it's just wrong. For all them girls in there, you know, I feel for all of them.
My daughter is Sarah Sumter, and she's an inmate at the Dublin Federal Correctional Institute. And right now, there's just a lot of turmoil going on and a lot of uncertainty. She's feeling a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear. Prison isn't supposed to be luxury. We want them out, healthy, functional, and productive.
Women also contacted us, either before being shipped out or once they arrived at a different prison. They say correctional officers were screaming inside FCI Dublin to pack up.
They would just run through the unit and say, you know, round them up and say, grab whatever, you lose all your property. I mean, whatever you get, and whatever you don't, you don't.
The women who were transferred to other states say it was the bus drivers that made their journey across the U.S. horrific. Some report being shackled for 11 to 12 hours. Others got sick or endured crazy, erratic driving. One bus driver reportedly played the wheels on the bus over and over again at full volume, and later rap music with sexually explicit language about sex acts.
I heard they were blaming them. I heard they were yelling at them, saying this wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for you. calling them whiny bitches.
The women say that they were told they were the reason for the closure of FCI Dublin and they should have kept their mouths shut. Attorneys for survivors say it is all indicative of the BOP's dismissive attitude toward women during the years of sexual abuse.
We have to remember also the trauma to these residents there who have already gone through so much, and now to be given, it seems like, days' notice to pack up their lives and just ship off to who knows where. It's just a continuation of the lack of basic human decency shown to those who are incarcerated at that facility.
5 U.S. senators sent this letter to the Bureau of Prisons last month requesting immediate information about the allegations of mistreatment during the transfers, saying the women are entitled to care, dignity, and respect. California Senators Alex Padilla and LaFonza Butler are among 5 who signed the letter. The spotlight on FCI Dublin became more intense after correctional officers were charged with sex crimes, and we have been following their trials closely as they have been convicted and sentenced to prison. Here's a quick recap to get you up to speed. About 40 miles east of San Francisco, a nondescript compound sits along the dry grass hills of Dublin, California. It's the federal women's prison known as FCI Dublin. It once housed Felicity Huffman and Lori Loughlin, who served sentences for their roles in the college admissions scandal. But a much different experience for other women. Behind those walls, stories of rape, retaliation, abuse, and silence.
What's important to know about Dublin is that the abuse was happening all over the facility. It was happening in housing units, in people's cells. It was happening at their work sites, the kitchen, the security office, from sort of sexual harassment and stalking, comments about their bodies, about sex, to violent rape.
He would tell me that if he could come into my cell, that he would bend me over and with me.
Everyone knew it, and nothing was done to stop it. And in fact, staff took steps to sweep it under the rug and retaliate against people, staff and incarcerated people, who tried to sound the alarm.
Susan Beatty is senior attorney with the California Collaborative for Immigrant Justice.
The BOP response to abuse at Dublin has been pretty horrendous. I haven't talked to a single survivor who's gotten the counseling services that are required under federal law.
Before its closure, there were about 600 women being held at the prison, many serving non-violent sentences in dorm rooms without bars. Over the last 2 years, 8 correctional officers, including the former warden, have been charged with having sexual contact with women serving out their sentences. James Highhouse, the chaplain, was sentenced to 7 years. Enrique Chavez, a cook, sentenced to 1 year and 8 months. Former warden Ray Garcia sentenced to 5 years and 10 months. John Bellhouse sentenced to 5 years and 3 months. Ross Klinger, who worked with the feds, is serving a 1-year home detention. Andrew Jones sentenced to 8 years. Nakia Nunley sentenced to 6 years. And Daryl Dirty Dick Smith is awaiting his trial on 12 counts of sexual abuse. Former Warden Garcia is the highest-ranking prison official ever to be sentenced on sex crime charges. He was convicted of 7 counts involving sexually abusive contact with 3 incarcerated women and for lying to the FBI.
Mr. Garcia.
Ray, is there anything you want to say to the women who are accusing you of this? He dodged our questions on multiple occasions.
Are you concerned that you may actually be going to prison? Just like the one you were warden at?
Though Garcia refused to comment, he did tell the judge on sentencing day that he was sorry and was a, quote, highly sexualized man who never came to grips with his demons. He went on to say he couldn't be more ashamed or more sorry. In March of this year, the FBI raided the prison for unknown reasons. At one point, FBI agents were seen removing at least 1 box of potential evidence and placing it in a minivan. 4 top managers were dismissed. That's all the public has been told to date. And people continue to fight for the women who remain incarcerated. We will have more on that story next.
This KTVU investigative report includes discussions of rape and sexual violence. Please use caution and discretion when watching.
Nobody is telling them anything, like whether they're moving now or not. There is all sorts of rumors going on.
Welcome back. As bus transfers were happening in the last 2 weeks, advocacy groups held a rally demanding the release of incarcerated survivors of the abuse. KTVU's Ali Rasmus has more.
Justice, justice, heed our call.
A group of family members, friends, and advocates for the women incarcerated at FCI Dublin Federal Prison gathered to call for their release. Federal Bureau of Prison officials announced abruptly they were closing this facility and moving out the more than 600 women incarcerated here to other federal prisons across the country.
The children and the husbands of these women are going to be suffering immensely, right? Because there's only one other federal correctional facility in the state, and it's not large enough to house all of these women.
Alexis Verdugo says she's worried her mother will be transferred to a federal prison in Illinois or even farther away. Verdugo and her husband and their young kids live in Phoenix. Her mother is in the middle of serving a 20-year sentence for drug-related crimes.
So it's been very chaotic. It's been a roller coaster of emotions this last week. She's called saying, you know, they're screaming at them. They're being asked to just up and pack all of their things into one small bag. You know, it just feels that they're being punished after they've already been victimized. And of course, like the unknown, they feel like in there they don't have anyone advocating for them.
The union representing the prison guards here is also upset FCI Dublin is shutting down.
My officers and their families have suffered the most devastating news this week, that they have lost their jobs at FCI Dublin and that most likely would be forced to abandon this community due to the closure.
The president of the union read a pre-prepared statement and did not answer any of our questions, but said this.
FCI Dublin should not close. It was being rehabilitated with the world watching. We fixed many issues and will continue to make Dublin a model prison. Under the watchful eye of the judge and the special master, we would have been a success story.
At least on that point, the prison guards union and the advocates here are in agreement. Supporters of the women in custody decried the Bureau of Prisons' decision to shut down this facility.
It feels like a really big evasion of accountability because, you know, they could have closed the prison several years ago when the sexual abuse started coming out.
Attorneys representing some of the women in this prison filed an emergency injunction to stop them from being moved to other facilities, but a vast majority had already been transferred. Allie Rasmus, KTVU, Fox 2 News.
KTVU obtained this memo sent by BOP Director Colette Peters after the women were bussed out, thanking staff for, quote, putting their best correction self forward during the transition. Part of it reads, the process involved careful planning and coordination to ensure the safe transfer of women to other facilities, with special attention given to their unique programming, medical and mental health requirements. We continue to expect that the women's needs are addressed with compassion and respect, providing ongoing support as needed. In March, U.S. District Court Judge Yvonne Gonzalez-Rogers made an unprecedented move, ordering a special master to oversee the prison and ensure no more abuse would happen. Many have speculated the announcement of the prison's closure shortly after was a way to get out of that federal oversight. The judge called the prison dysfunctional, despite earlier promises from the Bureau of Prisons that things had changed for the better. It is the first time a judge had demanded such oversight in the history of the BOP. The judge appointed Wendy Still, a former Alameda County probation director, to identify problems at the prison, come up with remedies, and ensure that judicial orders were carried out fairly. Still was given a small team to work with.
Her team was amazing. It gave us hope. For the first time since I've been in the BOP, I had hope. All of those women really seemed to be compassionate.
Still's team told the women that they were there to keep them safe, but true reforms would never come to FCI Dublin. The special master and her team started their work on April 5th. The Bureau of Prisons announced the shutdown 11 days later.
Why was this decision made? And was it retaliation in some form or fashion? And what happens to both the inmates to make sure that their constitutional rights are protected, but also the staff. The staff that did their job and didn't participate in this and indeed supported the whistleblowers need to be protected. Yeah, so are they shopping judges in a way, trying to make sure their facilities are in jurisdictions, federal jurisdictions, where they might have a more sympathetic air on the bench, at least statistically.
Judge Gonzalez-Rogers tried to pause transfers to ensure Special Master Still could review paperwork. The BOP moved forward with its plans anyway. And there are still stories of survivors being released early under extraordinary or compelling circumstances. Last year, a federal policy was amended to include a victim of abuse category for compassionate release. More on that next.
This KTVU investigative report includes discussions of rape and sexual violence. Please use caution and discretion when watching.
Welcome back. Before the closure of FCI Dublin, attorneys from across the country were working to free sexual assault survivors from prison early under what's called compassionate release. The legal argument is that someone could be freed early if they were sexually or physically assaulted by prison employees because they should not have to endure abuse on top of their sentence. One woman who says she was abused and sexually harassed by 5 correctional officers was the first of 27 women applying to get out early at FCI Dublin. Her name was Aimee, and she was released in May of 2023. At the time, she spoke with us immediately.
Whether it was sexual, all sorts of abuse. They strip search 3 inmates in my cell room, 2 inmates that are not from my cell room, and my cellmate. They believe it's our fault. They believe it's our fault. They tell you, you're the troublemaker, you caused this, and you're an embarrassment.
We continued our talks with Aimee after her release. She was trying to adjust to life on the outside, living day to day in San Diego and trying to piece her life together.
How many women are still behind and aren't getting the help, are not on the filing charges? They're not being known. Nobody knows about them. They don't have attorneys. I mean, thanks to my team, I'm out, but what about the rest?
Many lawyers who are helping free survivors are now working even harder with the shutdown of FCI Dublin. To date, an organization called Families Against Mandatory Minimums was able to get 17 out of 27 sexual assault survivors released early. Here's part of our conversation. Joining us now is Shauna Rifkin, Deputy Counsel for Families Against Mandatory Minimums, or FAM. Her organization is behind dozens of similar cases of compassionate release. Talk to us about what that was like to get all of these women to come forward and to get compassionate release for them. That's something that wouldn't have happened before had the law not changed.
You're absolutely correct. It's something that wouldn't have happened had the law not changed. And I think the law that you're referring to is the First Step Act. So the First Step Act made it so that individuals themselves could bring motions in court to reduce their sentence instead of having to wait for the Bureau of Prisons or the Department of Justice to do so. But I also want to say that these cases would not have happened without reporters and without people paying attention. So, the success story here is a success story of people paying attention to women's stories and actually believing women and believing, that they had been abused in prison. We have cases, that are not just at Dublin. So we have cases that are stemming from other abuse at other prisons across the country. But, there's probably a lot more cases that we just don't know about. And that's part of the problem of all this.
Talk about how you are convincing these judges. What kind of arguments are you making so that they understand what's happening and can grant an early release?
Yeah, so I think the most basic argument is that people were not sentenced to be sexually abused in prison. And the Bureau of Prisons has demonstrated a fundamental failure to care for people in its custody. Judges across the country have seen and understood that should not be allowed. Judges are saying in their motion, in their orders granting these sentence reductions, that they in fact did not sentence this person to be sexually abused in prison, and this person should be able to return to the community to heal from the trauma that they have endured.
Are you facing any resistance from federal officials in the U.S. Attorney's Office? You can't imagine that they're happy that people are getting out early.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, the Department of Justice has put a lot of effort into prosecuting abusers, which is important. But the Department of Justice should also be aggressively pursuing justice on behalf of survivors. And to their credit, the Department of Justice has been agreeing or, they're filing what are called non-opposition motions, where they essentially say they don't oppose the sentence reduction case for a survivor. This is a new legal ground. It's unprecedented in the sense that this never existed before a few years ago. So this is a new legal ground that has been open and has been adopted by the Sentencing Commission, and we're hoping will be expanded moving forward.
What are these women telling you? What are they saying when they get this granted and they're released early?
I mean, it's life-changing for them. I think people, honestly, many of them are speechless, and it's devastating because part of the reason they're speechless is that they never thought anyone would believe them. And I think a lot of them have hope for the first time. There are women that we talked to who thought that, they would just that they would have to suffer under these conditions for a long time. And now they feel empowered knowing that someone believes in them and someone believes in their story.
Next, we take you back to the beginning to explain how the abuse was uncovered.
This KTVU investigative report includes discussions of rape and sexual violence. Please use caution and discretion when watching.
Our first real glimpse into the horrors women faced was revealed to us 2 years ago. We'd like to take you back to that time when the first officer admitted his guilt in February of 2022. His name is Ross Klinger, and the first woman KTVU spoke to in depth about the sex crimes she endured. Her name is Andrea Reyes, and she opened the floodgates by speaking out. Ross Klinger was the first officer at FCI Dublin to be arrested and charged with sex crimes in 2021. He pleaded guilty, and in January of this year was sentenced to 1 year of home detention, the lightest sentence of all the officers, as his testimony helped the FBI with Warden Garcia's case. One of his sexual assault survivors told KTVU in an exclusive interview all about what he did to her.
I felt hopeless, and like they didn't believe me because I was an inmate and nothing I said mattered.
Andrea Reyes of Riverside County had perhaps the most disturbing story to tell about Officer Ross Klinger and what he did to her in 2020. He has since pleaded guilty. Reyes says not only did Klinger have sex with her and promise to marry her, but he also dug into her private medical records to uncover her mental frailties and use them to prey on her.
It was one day that I was in the SHU working on the floors, and that's where he pretty much let me know that he was looking into my files, and he knew that I had 4 children. He knew what city I was from. He knew all about me. And I was just like, whoa, he's on some stalker stuff, or he really likes me. I didn't know which one to think at that point, what to believe.
That's new to me. And I've seen hundreds of women who have complained about sexual abuse in jail and prison. I've never seen the staff go into the records.
Terry Coopers is a forensic psychiatrist who lives in Berkeley. He testifies in prison sex abuse cases across the country.
It's just exceptionally painful and traumatic. Going into records, I mean, think about sexual assault. It's a violation of a boundary, of a woman's boundary, by physical strength, brute strength. And the incursion into medical records, which by law and we expect are confidential, and then using that information in the perpetration of sexual abuse is just beyond the pale. I just can't imagine something being more traumatic.
He started making me feel comfortable with him, started making me feel like I could talk to him, started telling me about his personal life. It didn't take long for him to actually say that he loved me, that he was in love with me. It was probably like a month into it. I guess I was alone, and I was vulnerable, and I like the things he would tell me, the stuff that he had been through, the stuff I had been through, I felt like I could relate to him.
Typically what happens is that officers who are inclined to abuse women search out the ones that seem most vulnerable, and this is going to be women who have previous trauma in their life. Then they're going to start getting very cozy with them. They're going to start talking to them kindly, and eventually they're going to start touching them, and they're basically getting them ready for sexual assault. They promise them things, they give them gifts, and then they assault them.
He would send me money. He bought my kids Christmas gifts and birthday gifts, and he would tell me that it was because he wanted me to know that he wanted to be my provider. He wanted to be my savior, my knight in shining armor. And I believed him.
Reyes says their relationship soured when she discovered Klinger also had a relationship with another woman. That's when she tried to end it.
He threatened me all the time. He would tell me that he was going to kill me, that he was going to kill me and kill himself. He told me that all the time. And I was afraid because obviously he knew where I grew up, he knew where I lived, he knew where my family lived.
She wasn't able to attend Klinger's sentencing. It was too traumatic, but she won't have to worry he'll be nearby. Klinger moved to Pennsylvania to serve that 1 year of home detention and must register as a sex offender. Since Andrea's interview, we have heard from dozens of women, most who share similar stories. They were groped, fondled, assaulted, and sometimes even raped by correctional officers who told them that no one would ever believe their stories. Many told us they were too scared to speak out. The brave ones who did said they were punished for it.
It's horrific in that prison.
Yvonne Palmore was formerly incarcerated at FCI Dublin. She's one of 50 women sharing their stories with KTVU about sexual abuse they suffered or witnessed. Palmore was at FCI between 2018 and 2019. Former warden Ray Garcia was associate warden at the time before being promoted in 2020. Palmore recalls being beat up by guards for reporting physical abuse by a female officer. When she came to, she was lying on the floor without clothes. Palmore says 3 guards and Garcia were standing over her.
Garcia definitely stood over me while I was butt naked, stood over me with a grin on his face and took pictures of my body.
Marie Washington says she and her cellmate were abused by another officer named Daryl Dirty Dick Smith between 2019 and 2021.
Every single round that he did, he would, say like sexual things to me. He would ask me if I'm sorry for my language, if my ass was real. He would ask me to like dance for him. He then would like flirt with my bunkie as well. And he told us to do something that he knew that he wanted to see. And we were like asking him like, well, what do you want to see? And so he was like, her, do it now, And so we engaged in sexual activity, and immediately we stopped because we were like uncomfortable.
Women weren't just raped and assaulted inside FCI Dublin. They were also retaliated against. In 2018, Sherry Dillon says she saw an officer flirting with a cellmate, promising her a future together. When Dillon reported it, she was punished.
When I left there, they had taken away all of my good time. And you get good time, which gets time off of your sentence. That was a big deal. That was like another year almost.
I was afraid to speak up because, for one, I didn't want to be put in special housing. I mean, I didn't want my room tore up. It's just strange. And it just seemed like if you don't go with the flow there, they outcast you.
After a certain point, you get tired of it and you find that strength to finally fight back. Every time you make a report like that, they would come and thrash our rooms or not give us day room, or, you know what I mean? You feel threatened. And so you can't really say anything.
I will never tell another inmate that they should go to the report anything to anyone higher up.
More so, I'm advocating for the women that are there who are scared to speak up, the women who are scared to come forward and tell their truth, because I'm going to tell mine.
To date, more than 60 civil lawsuits have been filed against FCI Dublin and the Bureau of Prisons. The lawsuits all allege sexual assault and retaliation would happen as a result of women speaking up. The suits also named more officers who have not previously been charged. We'll be right back.
This KTVU investigative report includes discussions of rape and sexual violence. Please use caution and discretion when watching.
Is it true that one of your prisons is known to staff and inmates, this is Dublin, as a, quote, rape club? Is it true?
I do not know that anyone calls it a rape club.
This prison is a cultural toxic environment. You have got a cultural rot in that institution that must be addressed.
FCI Dublin had been the target of several congressional hearings over the past couple of years, all focused on the sexual abuses reported there. Then came Colette Peters, hired in July of 2022 as the new director of the Bureau of Prisons, billed as a reformer who would bring change. In a rare one-on-one interview, she talked with KTVU last year after visiting FCI Dublin and outlined her optimism for a culture shift. Here are some of the highlights of what she said at the time before she ultimately decided to shut the prison down.
It really was an excellent visit. It was a full day visit where we were able to talk to the women in our custody, talk to our employees, spent time with the executive team, and we're really seeing some exceptional progress happen at that institution. And I'm really proud of the work that people are doing. I know that culture change is hard, but I think we have the right executive team in place, and they're certainly making the change happen. What I heard from both the women in custody and our employees is that they're feeling supported. We talked about enhanced programming. So new programming focusing on career and technical education that the women were really excited about. When I talked to the women and asked them, tell me what programs you're in, many of them said to me, I'm in all of them. I'm in as many as I can be. So they were excited about which programs were being delivered. I have been very clear that retaliation will not happen on my watch. I've been very clear in my communications to employees. It's one of the things that we have talked about both times when I was at Dublin, when I spoke to the women and spoke with our employees. I just think this is a really great opportunity to begin telling the story of change at Dublin. I think we want to ensure that this is one of our best run facilities, and that we pull it out of the old culture and into the new. And I think we're on the right path to make that happen.
The optimism was short-lived. Leading up to the prison's closure on May 1st, women inside and attorneys continually telling us that things had not changed. Coming up, the history of abuse dates back decades. Hear from a whistleblower who tried to stop it.
This KTVU investigative report includes discussions of rape and sexual violence. Please use caution and discretion when watching.
Welcome back. The abuse and corruption inside FCI Dublin is nothing new. It had been going on since at least the 1990s. Valerie Mercadal never received the proper care after her time at the prison 30 years ago. In the 90s, Dublin housed men too. Mercadal says guards would open her door, letting unwanted visitors in. She says she had to fight them off to avoid getting raped.
He had jumped on top of me and started touching me and tried to mess with me, have sex with me. And at that time, I kind of picked him up off of me. After that, I took the mattress and put it at the door. And I laid at the door because they came in at night from 12 to 8. So I would lay at the door, and when they try to open up the door, I would say, no, don't open up my door, don't open up my door. I don't want no man. I was petrified, I was traumatized, but we didn't have no help.
Mercadal was put in solitary confinement when she reported the attack. She was told it was for her safety.
They want you to be quiet. So, and a lot of women can't take the whole. That's why I said you need God, because a lot of the young women can't, one lady set herself on fire in solitary.
Women are terrified of solitary confinement more than men are. And the reason is because in solitary you have no connection with other human beings, and that's very important to women. So they dread being sent to solitary, and therefore they don't report, or that's the tendency. So the reporting has to be opened up. It has to be to an outside agency. You can't have women reporting to the very officers who are abusing them.
Mercadal sued the prison in 1995. In a settlement, FCI Dublin made a good faith promise to implement policies to, quote, reduce the risk to female prisoners of sexual assaults and harassment by correctional staff. But there was no law in place to enforce it.
It's sad. It's like literally the lawsuit did nothing.
30 years later, Mercadal is now a pastor in Long Beach.
What led me to become a pastor is when I got out of prison, I went through so many hardships because of what happened in prison. I'm depressed, and this is like 30 years later. The more you speak on it, the more you talk about it, the better the more healing you'll get. So that's maybe one of the reasons why I am speaking up.
And then there are whistleblowers. Tess Korth, the former manager at FCI Dublin, told us in 2022 she was forced out of her job when she spoke up. At least one whistleblower said she tried to report what she saw, but she was ignored. and then told she had to move to another state.
I got called into my supervisor's office. First time in 25 years, I got a letter of reprimand for questioning her leadership.
Tess Korth worked at FCI Dublin for 25 years, rising to the level of unit manager. She was one of 22 guards to get reassigned to another prison. She says it was because she had regularly called out bad behavior from staff.
I did a report to the Office of Inspector General. Within a few weeks of that report, everything turned upside down. I started being retaliated against.
Instead of leaving her home and moving to Oregon, Korth retired.
I told them to shove it and some other choice words. They've been reported. The things that other staff have observed them doing, like sitting in their office in the dark, watching inmates, terrorizing inmates, being abusive to other staff members, just things that they're not supposed to be doing, are ridiculous. And we've been reporting stuff for years, and you know, they still work there.
To date, we know of at least 24 officers who have been accused of inappropriate behavior and placed on leave, aside from those who were already sentenced. Some have been reassigned to other prisons. Stay with us.
This KTVU investigative report includes discussions of rape and sexual violence. Please use caution and discretion when watching.
You have heard from Kendra throughout the show. She questioned whether speaking up and testifying was a good thing, but she wants to be a voice for others. We leave you tonight with more on her story. Kendra Drysdale is adjusting to her new life on a farm in Santa Cruz County.
I had to go to Costco the other day and I cried. It's overwhelming, but my family's helping me through it.
With freedom comes survivor's guilt.
I am blessed, and that's where the guilt comes in, because I am very blessed. I felt like it's not fair for me to be home when they're suffering so bad.
This is why she's speaking out to help those still serving their sentences.
There is no programming in the BOP right now. I mean, I can say from my experience, where at the places that I was at, which is multiple, there was no programming. There's no rehabilitation. They're just warehoused. And it's very, very sad.
For Kendra, it was a lack of medical care that left her in constant pain. She has kidney stones and says it took 1.5 years for the BOP to follow up on a urologist's order.
It did not take me for the CT scans until Judge Gonzalez, until I testified in front of Judge Gonzalez. That's when they took me, right after I testified, and I never got the results or got to see a doctor again after that. They will do the immediate care that they're forced to do, but after that, there's no follow-up care at all.
In response, a BOP spokesperson says medical care is given with a person's needs addressed on a case-by-case basis and treatment tailored to their condition. Kendra is also pushing for accountability. The First Step Act, or FSA, allows people incarcerated in federal prison to earn time credits towards early release. And the Second Chance Act lets eligible people spend some of their final 12 months of their sentence in a community correctional facility or halfway house.
The population of the BOP would decrease immensely. There's so many people right now in the BOP that are eligible for the Second Chance Act and that are not going home. I just want them to do the right thing. The BOP needs to start doing the right thing.
The BOP told us all people in custody are regularly reviewed to ensure they're given the appropriate credits and placement in community settings when eligible.
It's been a long road. I thought they were always going to find a way to not let me out.
Kendra spent the better part of 20 years addicted to drugs. The 50-year-old's goal now is to become an addiction counselor to help young adults heal from their trauma. She's healing too, but has hope.
I have a family that loves me. I'm sober today. I have so much going for me. I will not stop working with the coalition and working whatever I can to help to fight for everyone's rights.
Federal Judge Gonzalez Rogers, who oversaw the sex abuse trials, visited FCI Dublin earlier this year and noted it lacked programming. The BOP admits many areas of the prison need improvement. They say its closure is temporary. Thank you for watching this KTVU investigation, Powerless in Prison, the fallout of FCI Dublin. You can rewatch the show on our website, ktvu.com, or stream it on our Fox Local app. Good night.